first question that we have is that of free will and predestination, and what are the points, additions that are laid out in Islamic doctrine, and then could you conclude on where you lie within that?
Free will.
Free will.
Free will, alright. This is it, huh? Not a familiar face, I'm just thinking. Huh? Crime Watch? There's just thinking a familiar face there. Right, so... Oh, you are from Birmingham? Alright, that explains. Right, so... right, so this is, to start off with, it's one of the most... I mean, it's not really a startup question, one of the most complicated questions that you could ever ask within any discipline, especially religion. How do we explain predetermination and then in light of free will, in light of, you add into the equation the omnipotence and the omniscience of Allah, and how does all of that, how do you live that? So it's not simple. People previously have struggled massively with this question, and the general kind of understanding that you have in textbooks, is it, in my, I don't know, this is my reading of it, a lot of the time it's almost a bit of gymnastics going on, because people don't know how to explain. So how can you explain that? Just look at the complexity of what you're asking. You're asking, how can God be all, I know this ties into the other kind of theodicy question as well, but how can God be all powerful, all willing, and you have free will, which clashes with the free will of the divine, and you can cause harm, and he can choose to ignore it, and he can still instruct that it doesn't happen. And so all these kind of things, how does any of it make sense then? What is the purpose of... so there's a lot of huge ramifications. I don't think I can just simply say, well, all these people came and struggled for, even pre-Islam, but with Islam, Islamic theologians, and then here's the answer. But what I would say is that in our recent times, we have maybe somewhat of a, I don't know if it's a clearer, but maybe a step towards the answer. We're probably a step more closer to clarity than they were, in light of things like science and quantum physics, and taking a look at things like this. They actually offer a certain explanation through the laws of physics. So you could see, those of you here that are familiar with things like the quantum eraser, the delayed choice kind of experiment, things like this. I explained this on my Monday nights with Mufti, this one just gone, so you can watch that for more detail. But I mean, otherwise you can just YouTube it, just look up things like the double slit experiment, how that works, and then the delayed quantum eraser choice, and how, I mean, in a very brief nutshell, the quantum world upon observation collapses. Those of you probably know that. Anybody here studying physics? Physics. Okay, so right here, what's your name?
My name's Adrian.
Adrian. Rocky. Adrian, no. Right, so Adrian's got it right there. Right, so the thing is, as you know, upon observation, the quantum world kind of collapses in its operation. Now, there's different interpretations to that, the Copenhagen interpretation or the multiverse theory. But the point is, they've actually done experiments to see that even with a delayed choice of observing what's going on, it happens to rewrite itself. I mean, you can just go on YouTube and watch the things that, obviously this is in the quantum world we're talking about, not in, to us, we wouldn't be able to observe this, like we're using apparatus and using things like when photons are emitted and they record it, so they're recording it, but they're choosing not to observe it, or they're not sure whether it will get observed. I mean, they'll explain it in detail. The main thing is that once you choose to know, it actually rewrites itself. And that sounds crazy, but I mean, if you watch it, the delayed choice experiment, and you start to see that, oh, so it's really weird. But time-space, as you're familiar with things like, obviously Einstein had explained time-space is one. It's not the way people had perceived them as separate phenomenon. But time-space is not how we have been imagining it. And multiple things are perhaps occurring, definitely at a quantum level, simultaneously. And upon choice, one of them is manifesting. Now that is, sounds crazy, but this is actually tested data. It's not something that, they just... So it brings us a step closer to understanding when scholars had explained that all things are a potential, but which one manifests is what you eventually choose to do. So the way I explain predestination is like a computer game, a video game. So you could say, well, the game had to have been designed and all potentiality had to have been designed. So whether you clock the game or you die in level 1 or you decide to take this route or that route or you get to stage 3 or you get extra powers along the way or whatever you do had to have been a potential. There had to have been options. But where you get to is up to the ability and the capacity of the player. So you can't change the whole game all of a sudden, but you can get to different levels. What manifests is your ability. And in a similar, obviously not identical, but in a similar way, we believe that Allah would know, God through His infinite knowledge would know the choice, but you have free will. That is, in my understanding, the best way to look at this. I know people have taken other approaches that we are just absolutely fixed. Now I know we are fixed in certain things, predetermination, even biologically, your genes, DNA, determine certain things that you will always do. But you can have interventions. So a good example is like saying being left-handed. And who's left-handed here? See, legends, left-handed people. So the thing is, you see now, for example, that is biological, being right-handed or left-handed, but it already sets a trajectory. It already sets a trajectory. I mean, they say 10% of the people are left-handed, yet almost over 50% of significant people are always left-handed, like people who become leaders, rulers, disproportionate. I mean, are they pre-wired with certain capacities to think in different ways? I mean, so yes, a certain level of biology has been predetermined by your DNA. So we're not saying that predetermination doesn't, but there can be interventions. People can change, they can enhance. So these are complicated questions, I think, but we do have, some people just had this understanding of we are fixed. Kullun musayyir lima khuliqa la. And they use that kind of hadith to say, well, everybody's just fixed. Allah created you to be in this way, and Allah is doing everything. And as opposed to saying Allah has set laws into motion and you are adopting and utilizing those laws, that Allah is literally doing everything. Which then, in my understanding, throws a huge spanner in the understanding of Allah and what is the purpose of the test, and what is the purpose of trial, and what is the purpose of reward, and what is the purpose of anything, if it's only to just say, well, I've designed the whole thing, rigged the whole thing, and I'm just going to... to me, it doesn't really make much sense. So that is best understanding that I would say in that I've explained. Okay.